So the topic revolving around video games needing an easy mode has sort of shown its head again. I find this topic actually interesting because there's a lot of hot takes on it. For starters, I think the more hardcore gamers would probably say if you can't beat a game on easy mode, then you just need to get good. Although I do kind of agree with that to a certain extent, I can completely understand new gamers who just might want to relax and play a game just for fun. Now, I saw a short video about a girl talking about this topic, and I know a bunch of YouTubers have already made a reaction, so today I'm not really going to react to the video itself, but I'm more of going to talk about discussion of video games and whether or not they actually need an easy mode. And with this short little introduction out the way, if you haven't already, take the time to subscribe to the channel. We actually hit my 200 sub goal pretty fast, and we're actually on the way to 300 soon, so obviously, if you're new and you enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Anyways, with all that out the way, today, let's talk about video games and easy mode because my name is Quasi and this is just a game. Okay, so I think I'll start with my take on the whole topic. So firstly, I don't think every game in the world requires an easy mode. If a game has an easy mode, that's fine, and if it doesn't, it's also not the biggest of deals. Personally, if a game has a difficulty option, and if it's a game series I'm familiar with, I usually try to go for the hardest difficulty. Games like Call of Duty and Kingdom Hearts, I typically play on critical mode or veteran mode because I played these games for like years. However, when it comes to like new titles that I've never played before, I usually go for like the middle or the normal difficulty. But here's where I'll play devil's advocate. I think that if a video game is story oriented, an easy mode should be a priority. There have been times when I was younger where I would enjoy a game solely for its story, but I couldn't really get to the end because the difficulty was just too much for me. I used to play a lot of Pokemon ROM hacks back in the game, and one game I remember, it was called Pokemon Dark Rising. Now this game had a way darker story than the original Pokemon game, but the difficulty was insane. I'm talking about gym leaders would have level 100 legendary Pokemon. Yeah, it was kind of crazy. So in cases like that, an easy mode should almost be expected. Another example is Persona 5. Now, I don't think turn-based games are all that difficult. It really comes down to your knowledge of the enemies and a little bit of luck. But at the same time, I can admit, Persona 5 does get a little bit challenging. The game is heavily story focused, and I find myself getting fascinated by the story than the gameplay. The gameplay almost feels like a chore, so I can understand the outcry for games to require an easier difficulty. But on the other side, I immediately think of games like Dark Souls because I think that this game really gives a light on the conversation. Okay, for the few people that don't really know anything about Dark Souls, it's a game made by From Software, who is notorious for making games extremely difficult with no option to pick a difficulty. Now, I have my own experience with the game that I already went over, link in the description, but from what I played, the difficulty is the experience. There isn't that much of a story, so enjoyment comes strictly from the gameplay. So obviously, given the difficulty, you can kind of understand why people might complain. Now, I think when it comes to difficulty, it really depends on the individual playing the game. Personally, I don't like games where I one-shot everything. I definitely need some type of challenge to fully enjoy a game. However, I know friends who like easy games so they can just finish them in a reasonable amount of time. And this leads me to my first criteria. So I think depending on who you are, the amount of time you have to play a video game plays a role in what kind of games you like to play. I already made a video regarding length and time of a video game, so I will be solely focusing on difficulty. I know a lot of my older friends who typically either play on easy mode or normal for every single one of their games. Now, it's not like most of them don't like a challenge, they just don't have time to invest in the game. One of the biggest examples is Nier Automata's hardest difficulty. I forgot what it was called, but essentially you die in one hit and the gun mechanic doesn't have an auto lock, so it actually is really difficult. Although this is an interesting way to play the game, it does make it so much challenging, and it takes a lot of time to get through. When I first played Nier Automata, I played on normal difficulty of course, and there was a learning curve, but I beat the game in a reasonable amount of time without having any trouble. But when I replayed the game on the hardest difficulty, I noticed my playtime almost doubled. Why was that? Well, for starters, because on harder difficulties, enemies are more tough. You really have to focus on your resources and level management. So essentially, I had to do way more grinding on the harder difficulty than on the lower one. Also, I died a whole bunch more, really slowing down my progress. So in essence, difficulty can also affect the length of the game. So depending on the type of person you are, you might naturally stay away from harder difficulties. I also think when it comes to difficulty, developers intend the game to be played a certain way. I honestly don't think developers intend for the players to start the game with the hardest difficulty. I think you're supposed to start on the easiest and then work your way up, so that you get used to the mechanics. There are even games that allow you to change difficulty mid-playthrough, and if you feel like a game is too tough or too easy, you can just switch it. This makes more sense because going back to Nier Automata example, there was no way for a brand new player to beat the game on the hardest difficulty, so obviously, This difficulty is really for after you beat the game. Also, like I said earlier, after experiencing the game once, it will probably give you the upper advantage when you tackle it on a harder difficulty. You see, when you play games on lower difficulties, you were experiencing the game for the first time, so you were learning the battle mechanics, the enemy patterns, and all the environments. However, after beating the game, you already know all these things, so going for harder difficulties might be a little bit easier. However, just because you're familiar doesn't mean you won't be up for a challenge. A while ago, I revisited Kingdom Hearts 3's critical mode. There is a section in the game where on the first playable map, you're going to encounter these archers. So on normal difficulty, the archers shoot a bunch of arrows at you. Now it is pretty hard to dodge and you might just get hit by one, but it's okay because you have a lot of health. But when you play on critical mode, if you get hit with one of these arrows, you instantly die. So you have to actually think about what you do. And this is what I love about difficulty. Even though I beat Kingdom Hearts 3, playing on critical mode made the game feel brand new because I had to actually learn how to utilize my block and find enemies' weak points. So we're near the end of the video, and what is my opinion? Do video games need an easy mode? Honestly, I say no, but it depends. I know it's a cop-out answer, but just hear me out. Does a video game necessarily need a mode where you just breeze through the game without worrying about anything? Probably not, but I do think that every game at least needs a mode where you are just introduced to the game's world and mechanics, and maybe even the story at a reasonable pace. This is also why I'm a big fan of dynamic difficulties, where the game adapts to the way you play. Maybe if you're breezing through the enemies too quickly, the game might change the AI patterns or give them more health and attack to make things a little more challenging. In the same vein, if you're struggling or constantly dying, the game might make the enemies a little bit easier so that you can get through the game faster. There are games that actually do this like Metal Gear Solid 5 and Resident Evil 4, so it's not like it's a new concept, but it'll be cool to see more gaming companies try this. So at the end of the day, whether you want to play a game on easy mode so that you can finish it as soon as possible, or you just want to play on the hardest difficulty for a challenge, games are games. Conversations like these are pretty cool because it's always interesting to see what other people's preferences are when it comes to their games. But with that being said, I pass the question to you. What is your preferred style of game? Do you jump right into the hardest difficulty or do you just play on normal? I would love to know in the comment section down below. Guys, like I said in the beginning, we hit 200 subs and we're actually on our way to 300. I really appreciate everyone who's been subbing to my channel this past year and hopefully we can hit 1,000 really soon. Anyways, like always, my name is Quasi and this was just a game.